To continue producing the high-quality podcast you're listening to, publishing engaging newsletter content, and posting YouTube videos, we would appreciate any financial contributions you can make. At this time, we have no advertisers, and we'd like to keep it that way. Our staff is small but growing. We can only produce a show with listener contributions from people like you. There are a couple of ways you can do that. You can sign up to be a monthly or annual subscriber at BroadwayDrumming101.com. You can also contribute any amount you wish through PayPal at paypal.me/Broadway Drumming 101 or through Venmo at Broadway Drumming 101. Or help keep us caffeinated by buying us a cup of coffee or a week's worth at buymeacoffee.com/BD101. That's buymeacoffee.com/BD101. We appreciate any support you can give. Don't forget to subscribe to the Broadway Drumming 101 YouTube page. You'll find more content that isn't featured on the podcast or on the Broadway Drumming 101 Instagram page. Make sure when you subscribe to the YouTube page, you click on the button to be notified when a new video is published. Thanks again for listening to the Broadway Drumming 101 podcast.
Welcome to Broadway Drumming 101. My guest today is Skyler Fortgang. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm wonderful, man. I actually remember the first time meeting you. You reached out to me. You asked for a drum lesson, and we started playing. And maybe 30 seconds in, we started playing something, and I said, just play a little bit, I guess, with more force. Then you played some shit. I was like, why do you need lessons from me, dude? What? I was like, I'm done. Thank you. No, seriously, I knew immediately that it's like, this guy, man, he can play already. So, I mean, we could all learn from each other, but I knew that you could play, and it shows that you can play. You've done your work because you've made your way into this whole Broadway scene, and you're gonna have your own show. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
So let's get started with that, and then we'll go backwards. You are going to be the drummer for which show?
For the Great Gatsby on Broadway.
All right. So how did you get connected with that show?
So I got connected with that show through Chris Jago, who I had subbed for a couple years ago in Paradise Square. And they gave me a call last summer, probably about June last summer, and asked if I wanted to come on board, because there was this whole process of we're doing a run at Paper Mill, and if all goes well, it'll come to Broadway. So they gave me that offer, and of course I was like, yeah, I'd love to do that. So Jago and I kind of have an interesting dynamic, because like we were talking about before, he lives in LA, and him and Jason are great friends. Jason, our composer. So Jago will come out, write the books, rehearse the books, set up the show, and then go back to LA because that's where he lives, and then give it to somebody else. So that's kind of like my position in this whole process.
So Chris doesn't want to play in New York?
I think he loves playing in New York, but he's got kids in a house back in LA. So
okay.
Yeah.
So how did you meet Chris?
I met Chris through Sean McDaniel, who's really a mentor for me. I owe everything to him. He really hooked it up, gave me so many opportunities. He helped me find my rehearsal space in the city, everything. But Sean recommended me to Jago during the COVID craziness, when everyone needed a last minute subs, and that's how I got hooked up with Jago in the first place. Yeah.
So you just reached out to him through email, through Instagram, text message?
Jago reached out to me because Sean gave him my contact. So he was in a scramble. I remember the text very well. It was like, any chance you could come in and learn today or, tomorrow and hopefully never have to play in the next 2 weeks, but maybe play in the next 2 weeks.
Wow.
It was that kind of situation. Yeah.
All right, so let me go back. How'd you meet Sean?
This is actually kind of a funny story. I met Sean in the first place because a family friend, like my dad's best friend, I don't know his exact position, but he works at the Book of Mormon. So that when Sean was playing, he is carpentry or props, that kind of area. When I was getting into drumming in high school, I think it was high school, like the first time I met Sean, or maybe my freshman year of college. But, he offered to set up a meeting with us. Sean was so kind. He didn't have to do this, but he was like, "Oh, you want to come sit in the pit?" And I was like, "Yeah," like I'd never done anything like that before. So that's how I met Sean in the first place. And then through college, we kept in touch. I kept asking him for lessons and he'd say no. And then eventually I was like, maybe I'll try now. And eventually I got him to give me a lesson. And he really changed the way that I play. Like totally flipped my world upside down in the best possible way. But that's how I got hooked up with Sean. So we have like a very long history of just like bits of mentorship here and there along the way, which I'm very grateful for sure.
So how did he change the way you play?
I think the biggest thing that I took away from the lessons with Sean was I was doing way too much. And I didn't realize until he was like, that's great. Just like do do way less. He's like, no 16th notes this time. I was like, oh, no problem. And then you get to playing and you're like, oh my God, I can't do that. I need to like really think really hard. And I was like, I guess I am playing too much. And he was, focus less about the ghost notes, the rhythms in between, whatever. And like maybe focus on like what kind of sounds you're making with your bass drum. Are you pushing in to the head? Are you letting it go? What kind of choices are you making? Are you hitting a rim shot every single time? Is your hi-hat too tight? Like stuff like that. And I was like, oh, this is stuff I've like never thought about in this kind of depth.
Mm.
It immediately changed the way that I sounded. It totally blew my mind.
What got you into starting to play drums in the first place?
Since I was 9, I've been playing drums, but I didn't, it wasn't really the traditional, like, oh, you join the school band route. There was actually this, I don't know exactly what it was. We were in third grade and there was this extracurricular dance program kind of thing that all the third graders did, like at lunch. And it was this like African dance thing. And there was a percussionist. And I was just like enamored. That is the coolest thing ever. He was just playing the djembe and ankle bells. I like begged my parents to let me take lessons with him. And he was great. His name is Rudy Bird. And I didn't know this at the time, but it turns out he was Lauryn Hill's drummer.
Mm.
So I learned from him first before I joined band, anything. He didn't teach me how to read music or anything. We just sat down and learned by rote on hand drums first was like the first thing I did. And then I did all the traditional, like here's the quarter note, blah, 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 when I got into school band. But that's actually how I got started.
What was his name again? Rudy what?
Rudy Bird. He's a
B
legend. I love
B
him.
Bird?
Yeah. He
Hmm.
tours with Kenny Garrett, that saxophone player now. That's
Mm-hmm.
what he's doing now.
Nice.
Yeah.
And did you have musical parents, musical siblings?
It's an artistic family. My parents for a brief period of time were actors, but now they both my mom, writes books and my dad does TV, film production, editing type of stuff. It's there. The support to have somebody in your basement banging away on a drum set 8 hours a day was there, which is
That's
helpful.
cool. Yeah, it's good to have people that understand the industry to a certain degree. You grew up where?
I grew up in New Jersey, in Verona, New Jersey, not far from where I'm sitting right now in the city, actually.
Did you come to New York a lot to, when you were younger? Did your parents bring you here?
Oh yeah, yeah. We were here all the time. Yeah.
You see a lot of shows back in the day?
Honestly, funny enough, I really wasn't into musicals at all until almost college.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then I was like, yeah, this is kind of cool. I got really into it and we started doing shows in high school. I was like, this is fun. But yeah, I I didn't really we would see a couple shows, like my grandma would like drag us to see The Lion King or something like that.
Did you have specific music that you first started liking when you were a kid? Rock, jazz, funk?
Yeah, I was like a big classic rock kid. And
Mm.
I feel like I owe that a large part to Guitar Hero.
Oh, really?
I
Oh, wow.
swear, like that game like changed. I was like, these songs are incredible. That game changed my life.
Guitar Hero changed your life.
Totally shaped like the like trajectory of like the kind of music I was gonna like forever.
Really?
I think this is exposed to like that such great tunes at such an early age that I probably wouldn't have come across otherwise.
That's so interesting. What was the things, any specific bands that you heard that you're like, oh my God, this is cool? I mean, obviously, I think Rush was on that at one point.
Yeah, Rush was in there. Queen
Mm.
became, that discography was something that I was like obsessed with immediately. But there was such a wide, they had like, this crazy 2000s alternative rock, but then there was Foghat and Poison, all that kind of stuff. So I got a nice wide variety of inspiration from Guitar Hero.
When you started learning about the bands, were there any specific drummers that you were like, man, this guy or this woman is just fantastic. I want to play like that.
Honestly, not from that stuff. I didn't really start like focusing on like specific drummers until like high school and college. But I think these guys were not in Guitar Hero, but like Larnell Lewis really is like a huge inspiration, and Nate Smith is probably like the guy that I'm like the
Mm.
most. I'm like, if I could do that, I mean, that's it. That's all I want. Larnell Lewis obviously has like those crazy choppy things going on, which are just like, fun to watch. But the Nate Smith is like he can do that, but he also has this crazy pocket. He'll just sit there and boom bap for an hour. That's what I love. That's my
Mm.
favorite.
So you got a little bit of Nate Smith playing less notes and Sean McDaniel saying play less notes.
Exactly. Yeah.
I guess the combination of those two has led you to where you are. You landed a gig on Broadway. But anyway, there's one song by Snarky Puppy that I absolutely love. What he does on that track is just fan. What about me? I think it
Oh
is.
yeah, yeah.
Oh my God. The
It's
end of
crazy.
that.
Yeah.
And the thing that I think there's a live version, I mean the version of it on YouTube. Maybe that's the same thing.
Yeah, they all those albums they recorded like live in front of a studio audience.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Have you got a
Crazy.
chance to meet him?
No, actually, I would love to meet him, but I've seen him play a few times live. It's crazy every time. It's crazy.
Yeah. Nate Smith, Larnell Lewis.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Obviously Steve Gadd, but at this point in my mind just feels like a given. Like it's just out there. Those are definitely like the big three.
Mm.
Yeah, I would say.
Somebody put a gun to your head and say, "Give me two more." Who would you say, real quick?
Jojo Mayer,
Mm.
that was probably like the earliest guy I was like, you could do stuff like that? Like that's crazy. Oh, and Chris Coleman. You know Chris
Mm.
Coleman?
Hmm.
He's killer.
Oh my God, he's amazing.
Yeah. Have you ever heard there's like this cover of Higher Ground, this arrangement that they did with it's him and Dave Weckl.
Oh, really?
It's crazy. You should, and it's like ripping. It's so good.
Wow.
I can't recommend it. I watch it like a couple times a year.
Like for inspiration.
Yeah.
You went to a college called Mason Gross School of the Arts. That's at Rutgers.
Yeah. That's at
Now,
Rutgers.
now why Rutgers and not someplace like University of North Texas or Juilliard or Berkeley?
So the way I ended up at Rutgers is actually really not what you think at all. But this does go, to say my with this lines right up with my philosophy that I'm not sure it matters where you go to school, but I will say I ended up at, due to a series of circumstances, I got I got cold feet and I pulled out all of my, I had applied to a bunch of schools like Ithaca and Berkeley and I can't remember a couple other ones, UMass, and I was like all set to go for music, and I pulled out all my applications. I withdrew, and I reapplied to a whole new set of schools for computer science, or something else I was into at the time.
Mm.
And I ended up at Rutgers for computer science, actually. And then when I got there for 2 or 3 weeks, I was like, oh man, I made a mistake. I like knocked on the advisor's door at the music school, went down to the building and I was like, is there any way I could like audition and transfer like in the middle of the year? Like I was immediately, I was like, I have to get back into it, the music program. And just by chance, Joe Tompkins, who's like the head of the department, the percussion department, was like walking by the office and was like, hey, we actually have somebody dropping out. We don't usually do admission in the middle of the year, but why don't you come by and like have a sample lesson with me? And I was like, okay. And then, I played all my rep for him because I was only a few months out of college auditions. And he was like, yeah, okay, come join the studio. And that's how I ended up at Rutgers.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Super funny.
cool. What do you have to do to audition? I didn't go to school for music. What do you have to do to audition for music school?
So most of the time, it depends on the school, but you have to send in like a pre-screening video of all your stuff. And that's like round one. And then you'll usually go for an in-person audition. It's like an orchestra audition, a pre-screen and then a selection, and sometimes you get in, sometimes you get waitlisted, but it's kind of a it's kind of a grueling process for an 18-year-old.
You went to study originally to study computer science.
Yeah.
Now, why, since you came from a family of creatives and you wanted to play drums and you were into Guitar Hero, was it the science behind Guitar Hero that you were like, well, I want to
Yeah,
learn
right.
this?
No, I really was never like much of an academic. I I didn't hate school, but I wasn't amazing at it. But computer science was something that I just like, it stuck for me. I thought it was so cool and I was super into it. I like took the AP class and everything, got a 5 on my exam. So I was like, I could do this.
Mm. I, and that's why you said, let me study this and see if I can make a living from it.
Yeah. And I was like, at the time, all your guidance counselors are in your ear. Like, how are you gonna make money with a music degree? You know what? You can make a lot of money? Computer science.
Well, it's interesting from what I see from your resume. You're a programmer and you do a lot of, I guess, music production. Has that side of your brain helped you with learning computer software programs?
Absolutely. I've always been super, super like a huge computer nerd. Like even since I was a kid. That's like one thing I've always been into. Just like the ins and outs. So it feels like a natural progression.
If somebody wants to do some of this music production that you do,
Mhm.
what should they start out with?
Honestly, any Mac will do to get started out. Like you don't need a whole MacBook Pro, but like Logic has become very accessible. I started using Logic when I was really young. Like I think I asked for it for like my ninth birthday because I'm a dork. But I started using Logic 8 and it was a different program back then. It was, you had to know where everything was and it was not like a nice shiny user interface. Now it's like very accessible. You can still do all the things you used to be able to do, but like the the main functions are very easy to find and it's easy to get things done. Get any Mac and just get Logic or GarageBand and just toy around. If you go on YouTube, you can learn the entire program, at
Mm.
least the basics for free. It's not, people think it's like rocket science, and I think there's a lot of like industry professionals that want you to still think that's like rocket science. So they don't lose their jobs, but
Mm.
but it's becoming more and more accessible. So I would say, yeah, definitely get a Mac. Don't try bothering with PC stuff for music production, at least early on.
Now,
If you really,
why is that?
Macs are just made for this kind of thing, like the heavy lifting, like coding and business work. Yeah, sure, PC is probably better fit, but the Macs are just like they're video editing, like audio editing, creative type stuff. It flows better on a Mac.
There are people that I know that have Mac computers, but with like they basically don't like the iPhone. They
Okay.
feel that Samsungs or Google phones are better. Are you in that camp?
No, no better. I'm no better. I'm all Apple all the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know. I just can't. I can't make the switch at this point. I just don't
Mm.
think I'd be able to.
Did you learn on PC? I'm sorry, we're like kind of off on a tangent here, but did you
No,
learn on a PC
no.
in high
I
school?
learned on Mac all the way.
Mm.
Are you talking about the computer science stuff or just in general?
Yeah, computer science stuff.
Yeah, computer science stuff was all PCs because I learned it in school. They don't splurge on the Macs.
Mm. Yeah, when I go on a PC, I'm like, why am I going to this corner? I
Right.
need to go on this corner. It's like over here it's supposed to start, but you know, I don't know. And plus, yeah, a lot of people tell me that the Samsung phones are better, the cameras are better, that it's faster, and
There's no way. No way. You get a picture from somebody with a Samsung phone. That's a complete lie.
uh, man, it's like it's a battle between my friends and I with this, and my son, he's like, look, Dad, see the camera. If you do this, I'm like, it does look better, but it's like that much better. I don't know. And plus, it's not the whole ecosystem for Apple. It
Right.
just works better.
It definitely works better.
Anyway, you moved to New York and, from New Jersey, and you're breaking into the scene. You have your own show coming up. If somebody wants to move to New York, since you've been here for a while and you've settled here, what are some of the things that you would say before you move to New York? These are the things that you need to know.
I think the biggest thing I tell like my friends that are like, oh, I want to do it. I want to move to New York, but like the XYZ, like I have this gig back here, or like it's expensive. I'm like, there's just never gonna be a perfect time to do it. If you're gonna do it, save money before you go and just do it and fully commit. There's there's nothing worse than like half-assing it. You know what I mean? Like coming here, if you're trying to come here and make it as a musician, especially, I mean, I saved a bunch of money. I was like, I'm going to leave all my Jersey gigs behind, which was hard for me because, I was like working every week there in the community theater scene. But I was like, okay, I think it's time to take the leap. I was like, I'm going to have to live out of that savings for a little while. But I intentionally didn't want to like fill my days with side hustle, etc. I wanted to like really spend all my time like practicing, making videos of myself, connecting with people, like going to shows, trying to go to, gigs at night and like, meet people after. It, that was like my full-time job. And I was like prepared for that. And I think that was a huge help personally to kind of get the ball rolling. So that's my advice. If you can find some time to like save a few months of expenses, tuck it away, and just be prepared, you know, to live out of that and like just take it. It'd be like, okay, I'm prepared for this. This is what I know I'm not working right now, but I'm actively working towards it. And I think I think that's the best way to go.
Somebody that just recently graduated from college in music school and wants to move to New York, say 3 6 months of living expenses, where they put their drum set, where do they live?
Yeah.
Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, Bronx,
Yeah.
Staten Island.
I mean, that's all I will say to anyone who's graduating college and listening, if you can live at home for a year, just do it. It is the best decision I ever made. And then I ended up living at home more than a year because of the pandemic. But it if you can do that, if your parents are down to let you live at home for a year, like I know you really just want to go, but like saving that money for a little bit, getting yourself back on your feet after college, acclimating to the real world, I think was incredibly helpful for me because there's, like you said, there's a lot of things you got to worry about. Yeah, where am I going to put a drum set? You need a rehearsal space. You really can't have your drum set in your apartment. So it's like you got to find a rehearsal space. That's an expense. You've got to find sometimes a place to store your gear if that's not also your rehearsal space, or you got to sell all your gear if that's the route you're going to go. If you're not going to have a rehearsal space. So there's a lot to think about, and I think it can be really good to take some time to just like live at home and figure all that out, come up with a plan for yourself, and then go. you know the city's going to be here, so there's no rush.
I connected with you at the music building on 38th and
Yeah,
8th. Do you still have that space there?
yeah, I do. Yeah, that's a
Now, I,
great space.
I was telling a friend of mine who has a son that's graduating from SUNY Purchase. He wants to move to New York, and this is somewhat kind of dedicated to informing him of what to do from someone who's actually been a success in New York, like yourself. Tell me more about that space, the music building.
It's a it's a building with a lot of charm, as I'm sure you remember. But it's a 12th floor building of just, it's like half like dad rock bands, half Broadway drummers, and then another half like, rap recording studios. It's a really interesting dynamic, but it's a great space. I mean, it's right in Midtown. Depending on how many people are in your room, et cetera, it can be pretty affordable. Um, 24-hour access. I mean, it's a great space.
So you have your drums there and you record there. How do you get your drums around? What do you do? And I guess you don't bring your drums around.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the short answer is like I don't, but I, I try not to. The nice thing about the music building being right there, like amongst all those rehearsal studios that like, Pearl and Ripley and whatever, like if I'm doing a reading, that's like the only time I'm ever bringing my drum set anywhere. And, I'm making like an extra $300 to roll it across the street in a very stressful 30 seconds. But like
Uh,
other than that, I don't bring it anywhere.
so if somebody asked you to do a club date in New Jersey or in Connecticut, you'd say, "Do you have a drum set for me?" Or would you bring your
Absolutely.
drums?
At
Okay.
this point, I mean, for a while, I tried to kind of play the game. I had a car in Jersey. I was lucky enough, obviously, that my parents, live close and I could store my car in the corner of their driveway. But eventually, there was too many. Yeah, my grandma's car was there at one point, and then my sister's car. So I brought my car to the city, and that was a nightmare. I lasted like 6 months, and I sold it, and then I was officially like, I'm out of the game. So yeah, I did a couple gigs where I would load it in out of town, but it's such a nightmare. So for me personally, like some people are down with that, but I can't with I got to drive downtown to the music building and somebody's got to watch my car and I got to make 3 trips upstairs and hope this guy doesn't steal all the drums out of my trunk while I'm looking the other direction. It's just too much. So yeah, I say if you have a drum set, I'm there, and if I can get there by train, I'm there. But otherwise, I don't think I'm your guy.
That's great. Find somebody else. Like, I'm not doing it. I got so interesting. Been in New York 31 years, and it took me until like my 28th year or so to say, what, I'm not dragging drums around anymore. When I met you and you're like, I don't take my drums. Like, what? I don't know if you were the inspiration for that. No, I don't think it was. I met you after that, but I was like, I'm tired of dragging drums around. And once you make that decision and you just do gigs where they have drums, there are plenty of gigs like that. But you're not going to be doing club dates in certain parts of the tri-state area if you don't have
Yeah,
a car and a drum set. But
no, no. And like, there's plenty of people that those are their gigs. Like I'm like, you know, that's somebody's work. So it's like I'm good. Some
mhm.
somebody's making money, like one of us. So that's okay. Like
Playing drums for a living, what are some of the things that you've learned about how to avoid drumming injuries? Have you thought about that yet?
Yeah, I have. I had like some injuries in college when I was like learning my senior recital. I kind of bit off like way more than I could chew, and I like it totally hurt myself. I had like really bad tendonitis, and it still exists. I mean, it doesn't really ever go away. It just like flares up. But I think, you know, there's not one technique that it works for everyone, which is kind of what they teach you like in school. But if it feels comfortable, it probably is comfortable. And like, just be careful of like, don't, just understand that like singers can't sing 8 hours a day and trumpet players can't. It's like, contrary to popular belief, we fall into that as well. But, we get a little more time. But, if you're playing too much and you start to feel something like your body's telling you something. So that was the biggest thing is like I stopped playing through that, or like if I started to feel pain, like I changed something up. And just like taking care of yourself from a general health perspective makes a big difference, which is something that I didn't really pay much attention to until recently. Of like, am I eating well? Do I have enough water? Am I sleeping? That's helped me not pull muscles and not, you know, keep my tendonitis at bay, etc.
In your career so far, what's the most challenging gig that you've ever had?
See, this one right now might be it, because it's a very weird situation. So again, with Jago, like with him and I kind of passing this thing back and forth since last September, we did a out of town run at Paper Mill first for this show. I played that whole run. So Jago wrote the book, but he left like I think like right before the first preview. He stayed until, yeah, because I got COVID. Classic. I always have COVID. But he stayed up until like the first preview, and then I played the whole run. So there was, changes being made, new cues being added, that like I was like, okay, I'm the only one that's ever played this. And then after that run, I passed all that stuff back to Jago. He put it in the Broadway book. And now there's all these new songs, and the old songs are changed. So the hardest part right now for me has been, I have all these songs like, oh, I know this song. Like I played this song eight shows a week for a month, but it's a little different in the middle now. And I have to like unlearn this like deep rooted, you play a show for that long, like it's autopilot. Like you know it. You know it cold. So now like learning all these changes from what was the show that I knew, it's still the same show, but it's not. It has been really challenging. Also, the book is just hard because Jago loves to write all sorts of crazy stuff.
Oh, really? Wow.
Oh yeah, I think his friendship with Jason allows him some really fun artistic liberties in the drum book, which I'm jealous. Most people don't get that.
So he's adding the 16th and 32nd notes that Sean McDaniel said take out.
Only every once in a while. I don't want to pit them against each other. They're friends. It's fun though. We have some big old choppy dance numbers, and it's a lot of fun. Yeah,
Really?
yeah.
So what's the music like? I really don't know. Haven't seen it yet.
It's kind of a mix. Like there's some like classic like theater jazz stuff like swing, but there's also like it's kind of poppy stuff, and there's also like the contemporary theater ballad. It's a mixed bag.
Hmm.
It's fun. I like it that way rather than like playing one style for an entire show.
Hmm.
But I think it all fits together pretty well.
Have you been doing a lot of subbing before you landed this gig?
I did a lot of subbing in 2022, and then I had like a couple like small contracts that like took me through 2023, and then like Gatsby, in late October.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, so I subbed on Paradise Square for Jago. That was my first show. And for Emma, really. I mean, I never actually got to play for Jago, but Emma was nice enough to keep me on. So I played for her a few times, which was great.
Talking about Emma Ford, by the way,
Yeah,
for
so
people that
Emma
are
Ford.
listening, watching,
Shout
watching.
out Emma Ford. Uh,
Yes.
so I did that, and then I subbed on Strange Loop, which was great for my buddy Marcus Walls.
Yes, indeed, my man.
He's the man. He is the man. And then, some small, I subbed on the other Michael R. Jackson show, The White Girl in Danger for Josh Priest, and like how Titanic off Broadway. So like a little things like here and there. I would do like one at a time. Um, and then I did a show at Paper Mill in the summer, and then I did Gatsby right at Paper Mill right after.
Hmm.
So that
What
kind of like
show?
there.
What show was
Oh,
that? Paper Mill.
we did Rent in the summer.
Oh, really?
That was so fun. I had a great
Oh
time.
man, it's a great show to play.
One of my favorites.
That's cool, man.
Talk about injury though. That I had to ice my hands. It's like 3 hours long and it's just loud.
I remember subbing for Jeff Potter on the Broadway version back in 2007, in the mid 2000s, and just loving the fact that it's like a rock show. I mean, you get to actually play. I mean, I never forget that was the first Broadway show that I subbed on, and I remember the first notes that you play is that, two plat,
Yeah,
2 3 2 plat, and you're like banging hard, and I'm like, this is cool, but like you said, you gotta watch yourself because you're playing hard throughout the entire
right.
show. You can
And that
definitely
opening
hurt
number
yourself.
is like 10 minutes long.
Yes, yes. But yeah, it's the older that I've gotten, I realize I have to watch what I do because I do get tendonitis. And one of the reasons why I was subbing at the tour of Hades Town because the drummer got tendonitis, and everybody needs to watch because we're not invincible.
Mm-mm, definitely not. Yeah. I pay very close attention to it. After my senior recital in college, I got a wake up call nice and early.
Mm.
I have distinct memories of like, that you're in college, you're like on the grind. But I was learning these crazy pieces. Like I picked up the hardest pieces I could find. I was a classical percussion major. I know this sounds confusing. I was a classical percussion major. That's my pieces. So I was like, it was crazy xylophone stuff, crazy marimba stuff, giant multi percussion setup, everything. And I remember it was like, I'm in a lot of pain, but my recital's in like 2 days, and I really got to shed all this. And I have distinct memories of like blacking out in the middle of my recital. The last piece, there was like this crazy marimba solo in like the middle of this percussion ensemble piece. And my body was like, we're done, bro. It's over. And I like mentally and physically blacked out. I was just like, I'm just going to make something up for these next couple bars because I don't even know where I am. And I like came to and I was like, oh yeah, I got to play this last. Like there's a video of it somewhere.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
But I was like, I was in like a thing for a couple weeks after that. So
Ah.
that was my early wake up call. I made sure I never touched that territory again.
So do you play a lot of percussion still?
Not so much anymore. I really would love to do more. I had to like, make sure people knew I knew how to play drum set first. So now I'm like,
Mm.
hey, I also play, percussion. I love it. It's a lot of fun.
Would you ever? Oh, not anymore. You got this show. It's going to last for 20 years. But
Amen.
if it ever closes, would you ever want to? Would you ever want to sub on a percussion chair?
Oh, absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. There's a percussionist on our show, Yuri. She's amazing. So, if we're still open in a couple years, I'll be like, yo, maybe I'll hop over there. That'd be nice. I know some people do that every once in a while.
So have you played percussion on a show yet?
Yeah, not Broadway, but I did in college a lot.
Okay. I see you study with Javier.
Yes. Yeah.
He's the man too, man.
He is the man. He's like one of those musicians that's like you watch him do his thing, like especially when he's playing congas, and you're like, I could never do that. Like no matter how hard I tried, I could never do exactly what he's doing right there.
Yeah, he's got the feel. He's got the right energy, the vibe. Just good person all around. And I wish I had, as they say, picked his brain when we were at Ain't Too Proud. And there were times where I would ask him things, but by the time I started really getting into the Afro-Cuban thing, we closed. And I'm like, damn. But I mean, of course, I could just reach out to him and actually, he was on the podcast as well. But he's just a wealth of information.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He was a great teacher too. I know.
If someone wants to get into subbing, what's something that you would say, man, you should make sure you do this or don't do this?
You mean like in terms of like trying to break into subbing, like that kind of thing?
Well, let's just talk about the actual preparation to sub and making
Okay.
sure that you're prepared. What would you what kind of advice would you offer to somebody that's interested in doing this?
I've always been taught that like you want to be as close to that person as possible. And I took that very literally when I sub. So what I do is I'll take whatever recording they give me and I will literally sit down at a coffee shop for 3 hours and like if there's anything that they play that's not in the book, I write it down. And you know, it might not be the same thing that they play every night. It might just be that one night, but they did play it and now I'm gonna play it too. You know what I mean? So like I'll transcribe fills, like I'll do it all. Like, you know, bass drum in this spot, you know, that sounded like a effect symbol on that beat there. You know, I try to be as literal as possible because like that as a sub, like, you know, your job is not really to put your take on it. Like, you know, everybody's different. Everybody plays it a little bit differently, but you're trying to be a clone. You know, that's the gig. So I really would just transcribe everything. That was like my, and after that it was easy. You know, you learn all the things you transcribed. It's like learning a tune, you know. And it was, I think that's probably the best way to go. Just there's no room for error.
Connecting with musicians in New York City and networking. What are some of the things that you did and what would you recommend people do if they're moving to New York and they want to get into Broadway or in the scene in general?
It's hard because there's like no right answer. Some people are like down to, you know, receive an email and grab a coffee, and some people like might take that the wrong way. It's like you never know. So that's incredibly difficult. I would say personally, I feel like there's no harm in sending one email and being like, hey, you know, got your email from so and so. I love what you do. You know, we want to grab coffee, take a lesson, whatever it is. Um, I think there's no harm in asking once, you know, and it does work sometimes. You know, I met a lot of people that way, and it might not necessarily directly lead to a gig, but now you know somebody who knows somebody else. It's all connected. I mean, that is a big part of it. Networking, meeting people. You know, you go see a show, open the playbill, and see who's playing drums, and you know, open up your Instagram, and be like, hey, I'm at the show. Like, if you want to, you know, say hi at the stage door, I would love to meet you. People are down for that. Like, you know, we're all human beings. So that I mean that stuff works. But then in addition, you know, just playing even the tiniest gigs that seem inconsequential, you never know who's in the audience, and you never know who's in the show that knows somebody else. That's the way it goes. It's just like you plant little seeds here, little seeds here, and eventually something grows. And once you get one, it just snowballs because your first gig, you meet 16 people. Somebody recommends you one of those people. Now you're on another gig with 16 people. Now you know 32. You know, it just keeps it's exponential once it gets going. As long as you go, show up, do your job to the best of your ability and be kind, you know, it'll take care of itself.
Just a warning, you're about to be on the receiving end of this now. You're gonna have your name in the playbill, and people are gonna be like, "Oh, Skyler, let me
Please
reach out to Skyler."
hit me up on Instagram. I will come meet you at the door. I want to say hi. If you want to grab coffee, let me know. I'm always down. I want to help people who are, you know, I want to help people who are interested because like you know, I was doing that. That was me. So anyone who wants to, you know, chat, hit me up. I'm open.
Well, if they want to reach out to you, how would they reach out to you?
I'd say Instagram is probably the best way, like in a quick way. My my Instagram is just my name, Skyler Fortgang .music. You can find me there. Give me a follow, shoot me a DM. I'll hit you back. I promise.
Do you have any endorsements?
I actually don't have any endorsements.
And
I'm
if you can get some, who would you want?
I'm kind of in like a equipment limbo right now, honestly. I was like very strongly rooted in like a couple things, and now I'm like having a an identity crisis gear wise. I'm just kind of I'm like trying new things now.
Mm.
So I don't know. I like these Los Cabos drumsticks that Jago's been getting me hooked onto. I know a couple guys in the city that use them, and they're good. They last pretty long. They feel good.
Mm. Los Cabos.
Los Cabos, yeah, they're a Canadian company.
Okay.
Really like those. I think the only thing I'm really firmly rooted in is Evans drum heads.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
No Remo.
I I don't like Remos. I don't know. I feel like growing up, like the standard was like Zildjian, Remo, and that's it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but I like the Evans heads a lot. Sean actually got me to try like a set of Evans heads, and I was like, oh, okay, these make a big
Mm.
difference. And Jago uses aquariums at the show, and they're okay. I like them too, but I think Evans just has a little bit more of a versatile edge.
When you go into these different pits from different drummers, you have to play on different cymbals, different heights, different angles, different heads, different tunings. How do you find yourself adjusting to all this? Do you just find yourself being a chameleon? Do you like, how did you adapt to all this?
Yeah, you have to just. I mean, the best if you can get time to go into the theater and like play around a little bit. That's the best way, and that's harder in some pits than others. Like a lot of times now, you're in a separate room, so it's like not an issue, um, which is great. But other times, like maybe the drums are on stage, and you're not going to be able to play. You might be able to sit behind there, but you're not going to be able to play, an hour and a half before the show, like most people will be able to. I used to like recreate people's setups at the music building at my setup. I think Jago is the hardest one because he's so much taller than I am. He's like long.
Mm.
So like we have his setup is he uses two floor toms as well. So like I'm all the way out here, there's times where I'm like this, but you just got to figure it out because you can't move it.
That's
So
true.
it's just a part of it. So I try to replicate that setup at at the music building. Right now it's not an issue because we have our own cozy little room far underneath the theater, but so I can go in there and play basically whenever I want, which is great. But yeah, in the past it's not been that.
Having your own Broadway show is just a fantastic thing. Not only do you have, you know, what your money's going to be like, but
Yeah.
just playing, it's exciting, it's fun, it's interesting, and you walk out and people are just cheering because they're just so happy, and you get to make people happy every night. I just hope it runs for a long time, but
Yeah,
this business is so fickle,
I know.
especially with all these shows opening up at one time.
I know.
There's
It's crazy.
it's going to be
I think about it every
casualties.
day. I'm anxiously checking the box
Yeah.
office, you know.
I did that too, and there's nothing that we can do as musicians to change that, but you got to kind of know and watch those things. But anyway, congratulations on your show, and again, I hope you run for a very long time. One last question for you: other than the Great Gatsby, do you have any other projects that you were working on or that you are working on outside of that?
Yeah, I play with like a lot of artists. Like I'll do like a lot of recording sessions and stuff like that. So like there's some tunes out there that I'm like, they'll pop up. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that one. That just came out. But yeah, I have a lot of that stuff going on. This is taking up most of my time right now, but which is great. I mean, no complaints. But yeah, I think, you know, yeah, again, follow me on Instagram. I always post about like gigs I'm playing downtown and stuff like that, if, etc. So
On Instagram, do you usually use the stories feature or do you use more of the reels or posts or all three?
I'll put like updates on my story a lot, but I post about like my posts are generally like life updates, and then like my day to day is like, oh, like hey, I'm playing this gig tonight, or like come hang out XYZ on my story. So yeah,
So it's not like life updates like I got up, I'm eating breakfast, I'm doing push-ups.
no, none of that. Nobody needs to know about any of that.
I think I saw, I don't know if it was on your Instagram, but I was like, man, it's so interesting to see the, I wouldn't say changing of the guard, but to a certain degree it is. But there are drummers like Emma, like yourself, like Ryan, and even Marcus is kind of like on the part, not really my generation of drummers in Broadway, but there's a bunch of new drummers that I see that I'm like, okay, this is cool to watch them all get these gigs and seeing them be so excited about the things that I used to be excited about. And I'm really hopeful and I'm excited and I love watching people get their own chance to have their own gigs like you, like Dan, and I'm sure Ryan's going to be next.
Yeah.
And even people that I know that are outside of the whole scene. There's this guy who's going to be reaching out to you. You probably know him already. He's probably going to reach out to you, but he's a young drummer who all he wants to do is play Broadway. And he takes pictures with all of the drummers who have shows. He's a really cool kid. He can play, and all he wants to do is play on Broadway. That's the only thing he wants to do. And I think it's fascinating because I'm like, man, there's so much more to the world than
Yeah.
Broadway.
I mean, it's
But
funny, like, that was my teachers told me too. Like the more I looked about, and there's a lot I like to do outside of Broadway. I like playing pop gigs, and you know, you have to use like real life, music skills and improvisation skills to fuel your Broadway playing. But you know, coming out of college, just looking at it, I was like, why wouldn't I want to do Broadway? Like, you make a bunch of money, you have all the flexibility in the world. It's like a perfect gig to like then have the freedom to do anything else you want to do. So I get why people want to do it. You know,
yeah.
I think back, like my teachers were like, you don't want to do that. But I think that was before it, like, I guess it was a different time. That's what they tell me.
Well, that's the people that I looked up to. You get Buddy Williams, and even the drummers that I looked up to on Broadway, like Clint DeGan and even I mean Larry Lilly was doing a lot of Broadway too, and I would look up to these people. And then I became their peers, and now people have looked up to me. I'm like, why would you want to do this? I mean, there's so much more to do. But then again, is there really more else to do? I mean, Broadway is a gig where, like you said, you have a steady income and you can take off and do other things. And there aren't as many opportunities as there were when Clint was around, or especially when Buddy was around, when there was
Right.
recording sessions and gigs everywhere in the city. But now it's you. Well, let me ask you a question. Do you live
Mhm.
in Brooklyn or do you live in Manhattan or in
Rather than Manhattan.
Queens? Aren't most gigs now in Brooklyn as far as like what people are, people are doing interesting things? Is it happening in Brooklyn or where do people go and play?
Mostly like Lower East Side, like
Really?
down by like Rockwood, which
Okay.
and like Rockwood Mercury Lounge, Bowery Electric, like all those like like small/mid tier venues are like all down there. There's one
Mm.
in Brooklyn too, but like that's like the heart of it.
So Rockwood's still the spot.
Well, the big stage there closed. I don't know if you heard.
No,
They
really.
they like kind of went under, and remember when they had all those like Sarah Bareilles and
Yeah,
uh
yeah, yeah.
they all had those benefit concerts there. I think they used that to like dig themselves out of the bankruptcy hole. And now they had the downstairs stage, which is gone, and the stage two, like the big one,
The
is
one where
gone.
you walk in, it's right there.
Yeah. The
That's
one where you
stage
walk in
two.
and it's like there's a like padded red wall behind you. The one where you walk in and there's like a really low stage and it's kind of a small room, bar to the left, that's stage one. That
Yeah,
one
yeah.
that one still exists.
Okay.
That's the only one that still exists. There used to be three stages there. The whole building to the right side, they
Hmm.
had to sell it back to the landlord.
All
So
right,
it
so you have Mercury Lounge, which is still there. I remember playing there when I first came. So that's
Mercury
still
Lounge
there.
is still there. Yeah. Bowery Electric. There's a few at like Berlin,
Man, interesting.
There's like a bunch of those like small venues.
New Blue, I guess.
New Blues, yeah, New Blue is more of like a jazz. It's like that like new like R&B jazz kind of vibe.
Hmm.
That's more of like a high profile like touring venue almost.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
but there's a lot.
So there's still a lot of places to play.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot.
And where do people hang out? Is there a place where musicians go for like jam sessions, or
Yeah,
where musicians hang out?
there's a few jam sessions. There's a jam session at Nubla on Mondays. Um, there's a couple, but there's one at the bitter end that's more of
Oh
like
yeah,
a rock sort of like that kind of jam
blues
session.
thing.
Yeah, and then like the new blue one is like just like that one's crazy. It's like,
I've
it's like
seen that starts at like 2 o'clock in the morning though, right? Because
it
what's
starts
his
at
face?
they start the set at like there's like a house band that starts at like 10, and then
Yeah.
the jam doesn't start until like midnight, yeah, or like 11. But that one's crazy. It's too crowded now. It's like
Mm.
there's like a line of people waiting to get on the stage. It's
That's
crazy.
that's the producer Mondays thing,
Tuesday
right?
Mondays, yeah. I mean, the house band is great. It's always good. Ray Angry is like
Mm-hmm.
the guy who runs it. He's great, obviously, but yeah, it's a little insane there. There's other ones
Mm-hmm.
though.
Hmm.
Real crazy. You could go to the Smalls jam session at like 3 in the morning and
Mm.
cymbals thrown at you.
Was it what? There was a place down off of Christopher Street where they had games.
Oh yeah,
Is that
it's what's called Fat Cat. Now it's called Cellar Dog.
does people still go there?
Yeah, there's usually like a live jazz thing going on there, and like they'll let people sit in like towards the end of the night, but it's not really like a jam session.
Okay.
It's more like if you have a friend in the band, like they'll let you come play a couple tunes.
Mm. Do you consider yourself a jazz player? Could you go and play all that stuff?
I could play jazz to like get me paid, but
Mm-hmm.
like I don't know, those guys like that's their whole life. I'm not gonna pretend that I can do what they do, but
Yeah.
I can swing if that's what you're asking. But yeah, all that bebop stuff is like that's a lifelong journey. I'm gonna
Yeah.
let them have that.
Mm. So is there any like swing stuff in the Great Gatsby?
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
Big band kind of thing?
Some big band stuff, and then like some like low key like party underscore swing. That's really fun.
Yeah. Good. Man, bringing me hope. There's still places to play and people to see and places to
Absolutely,
go in New York. That's cool.
absolutely, yeah, yeah. It's just a different. It's just different now. I mean, things are still coming back from the pandemic, but this I feel like this is the first year that I felt like, oh, okay, like it's like a little more normal. Like people are starting to be ready to put money at arts, you know, instead of like keeping their building open being their main concern.
Do you go to Brooklyn at all to like ornithology and all those places? There's just other
I've
clubs
seen
and
shows there, yeah, but there is a gym there too. But yeah, I don't spend that much time over there, but yeah, from time to time.
so most of your hanging is in Manhattan.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just like in Midtown every day, so like we go to the bars in Hell's Kitchen, like,
Mm,
or just like right around the corner from the theater.
mm, that's cool, man. Well, good, 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 good. Congratulations, man, and thank you for being part of this podcast. It was great to get to know you and hang with you for a little bit. And I wish you the best. And I hope that your show runs for 20 years and you reap all the benefits of Broadway, man. It's a great, great experience. And I will eventually come see the show and hopefully you'll be playing that time and maybe we can grab some coffee and I can pick your brain.
Absolutely, absolutely,
All right, man. Thank you, Skyler. And we will talk very, 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 very soon.
absolutely. Thanks for having me.